Postmodernism. It's a word you may have heard bandied about on the internet, often with derisive overtones. Yet rarely does anyone take the time to explain what postmodernism is. If you're insatiably curious, like me, you've probably searched the internet for what is postmodernism. And maybe that's even how you found this video. So today, I'm going to explain what postmodernism is and hopefully convince you that it's not nearly as scary as it's made out to be. To start off, I should mention that I am not a philosopher. I'm just a guy who thinks too much in public. So take everything you hear today with the internet's grain of salt. As the dictionary has it, postmodernism is an attitude in art and culture that rejects the meta-narratives of modernism. What does that mean? To unpack this definition, we have to understand the narrative paradigm of human thought. Narrative is another word for story, and the narrative paradigm claims that we communicate by telling stories, which motivate, persuade, and inform us based on how they literally and metaphorically relate to our values. For example, if we tell of how our community is watched over by an ancient oak tree, it has a very different effect on our self-image than if we tell of how we're watched by the hungry alien at the bottom of the sea. These two narratives lead us to see life completely differently, even though the reality of the people and places in the community remain the same. The narrative paradigm contrasts with the rational paradigm, which suggests that we make decisions based on logical arguments. And while there is merit to the idea, all it takes is one look at a controversial issue with an obvious rational answer, like whether climate change is real or vaccines work, to see that narrative is more powerful than reason. Some things have both rational and narrative interpretations at the same time. The Big Bang is a well-supported scientific theory, but it's also a narrative about the origin of all things, and hence the purpose of existence. Same with evolution, same with thermodynamics. Science treats these as brute facts, but we sometimes interpret them as stories that teach values about how we live our lives. So that's the role of a narrative. What's a meta-narrative? A meta-narrative is a grand story of history, an interpretation of human cultures, civilizations, and empires, how they built up to what we have today, and what they are bringing us toward in the future. A meta-narrative strives to teach universal values and authoritative truths. Here are some examples. Christianity emerged from Israel, spread to Rome, then across Europe, leading to the European Enlightenment. From the Enlightenment, science and human rights were discovered, leading to the American Revolution, which led to the birth of society as God intended it to be, the democratic republic founded upon Judeo-Christian values, and all that is left is for it to finish spreading across the world. Here's another example.
History has been defined by class conflict between the slave and the master, the serf and the lord, in general, the lower class and the upper class. Time and again, in all its forms across many cultures, the lower class has overthrown the upper class and changed the system. Over time, the systems became less and less unfair until modern day, when the members of the lower class, the employed, have freedom to reject their employer masters in favor of new masters, and even have a chance to rise to the class of employer themselves. In the future, the employer-employed class system will be overturned for a system where the means of production are owned by those who work them, socialism, which will be overturned one final time for a universal, borderless community where the abundance of society is owned and enjoyed by all, communism.
And another one. Humans are rational and live by making and upholding contracts. When we pay our dues and keep the score even, life gets better for everyone. Thus, the best possible society is one founded on a contract of nonviolence and a right to property. Over the ages, humanity has chipped away at the forces of domination and coercion until we finally reached the end of history, liberal capitalism, which will take us to our destiny among the stars. These stories tell us our place in the grand scheme of things. They give meaning and purpose to our lives. But there's a problem. There are a bunch of them, and they all contradict one another. Worse, each of them claims to be truth with a capital T, claiming that their values and their interpretations are natural, objective, baked into the fabric of reality, and anyone who disagrees with them is denying morality, denying reason, denying truth. Modernism says, let's let these narratives go at it, and the best ones will rise to the top. Postmodernism says there isn't a single true meta-narrative, even one that we could discover. History isn't a grand story being acted out over all generations across all time. And believing it is can lead to all kinds of tragedy and oppression. After all, it's in our nature as humans that if that which gives our lives meaning has faults, we tend to turn a blind eye to them. Postmodern thought has several trends. One of them is to deconstruct attitudes and beliefs that are commonly taken for granted, such as what counts as a mental illness, social roles, and binary thinking. If there is no grand story with true interpretations of everything, then most traditions and philosophy are just culture. Does marriage have to be between one man and one woman? Or could it be more inclusive? And what alternative institutions might perform the same functions if we remove the stigma against them? What about good and evil? Is it really as simple as light versus darkness? With purity, order, kindness, respect, and service on the good side, and anger, resentment, lust, violence, and filth on the evil side? Or are there times when it's better to tap into our darker nature and reject aspects of the light? And even then, maybe it depends on your point of view. But perhaps the most profound tradition postmodernism challenges is logocentrism. Logocentrism comes from the Greek word logos, which describes the union between language and logic. Logocentrism is the attitude that language, and hence logos, is the definitive mode of communication, and hence the foundation of knowledge. With logos, we construct arguments and theories. We write laws and contracts. We group and divide, organize and categorize. Postmodernism rejects logocentrism. It says language logic is not the definitive mode of communication, nor the foundation of knowledge, but there are many other modes which are just as significant: art, music, body language, humor, subtext, and context. This, I think, is why postmodernism is hard to grasp logically, because it says logic is not the foundation of knowledge. Postmodernism is often communicated using other means, such as humor and art, specifically to subvert what logos has conditioned us to expect.
The night that I learned I had no radishes, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, crawled out of my air dots to show off his new Nike sneakers. And I was just so miserable that all I could do was stuff him back into my air dots.
Now, maybe this sounds scary to you. After all, if we remove logos from its altar and deny the supremacy of any meta-narrative, what is left to hold the fabric of human reality together? I understand. I'm no stranger to fear. But like all fears, we have a choice of how to react to it. Do we declare it the enemy and spread our fear to others so that they may stand with us and fight against it? Or do we try to understand it with cautious respect? Sometimes, in order to see clearly, we must remove the plank from our eyes. And in the place of logos, we find body language, humor, personal image, power, and many other things. That's not chaos. It's maturity. Throughout the first quarter of the 21st century, we've seen a new movement appear in culture, which uses the skepticism and irreverence of postmodernism to communicate human messages. It's called Metamodernism. Instead of fighting the flippant and ironic attitudes of postmodernism with stronger and stronger serious emphasis, Metamodernism leans into it with a tone called ironic sincerity. It makes the joke, but the joke is not to counter the powerful moment, it's the catalyst for the powerful moment. Metamodernism is the manifest answer to the question of what happens if we remove logos from the center of our lives. It turns out that things like meaning and truth don't need logic and language and theories to support them. They just exist. And we can recognize that they don't align with some grand narrative that applies to all people, but everyone experiences joy and sadness and longing and fulfillment in their own way. And that doesn't make them any less real or important. That's my understanding of postmodernism and the direction the attitudes of society are going. It's not a thorough discussion by any means, and I encourage you to look up other people's takes on it. History is a story of change, and right now we're in a phase called postmodernism. We can never go back to the past, and the present won't stay here forever. We can be afraid and try to preserve what's left of the golden times gone by, or we can adapt, learn the lessons of history, and work to bring about new golden times. It won't be the same, but it can be just as good, or even better. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.